are here going live. Yes. So we're here live with Clove. We had a little bit of some craziness with me trying to get on here. Sometimes that happens. But we have Clove today from Peru. And I'm just so thankful, Clove, that you're here. I'm so thankful that you took the time to do this. And for my audience, I just want you to know I met Clove at an ayahuasca retreat a little over a year ago. And just her life transformed by plant medicine, but my life transformed by plant medicine. And I was just so utterly moved and changed by her diligence and her desire for wholeness and her desire to see other people connect with the earth, other people come into that place of healing and wholeness as well. And I just knew that we needed to hear from this well of wisdom, I call you, in the jungle. And so, Clove, you can say hello, and then I'll ask you some questions.
All right. Thank you, Ellen. Hi. Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm not used to being live, but here we are. Hello from Peru. I'm in a place called Iquitos, jungle metropolis. We have here a plant spirit who's known as a trickster called Chuachaki, very common in greeting newcomers. So I think that might have been what happened with the is going live.
Oh my gosh. So Clove, I know that you've spent a couple of years living amongst the Shipibo people and learning and growing from their things, but there's always a backstory to something like this. You didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to go to the jungle. So I would love for you just to share a little bit of your story, whatever you want to share, how much, how little, it's all up to you, but just where you come from and what in the world happened that led you all the way to a lifetime in Peru?
Yeah, wow. It's you're right. It's not just something I woke up and decided to do one day. It was the process of a really long journey. I came to Peru for the first time about 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember now. And that was after a long years and years and years of searching for answers, searching for healing, searching for a feeling of wholeness and a feeling of my place in the world and that I belonged somehow, and that all of this meant something, which I suppose are existential struggles that people have been going through forever. For me, and I know for many, many people who come on this path, who find this path, it was a lifetime of, trauma, basically. I am from Tanzania originally, grew up very, very poor with a very traumatized mother, who also, went through her own lifetime of struggle. And it took me a long time to figure out why my life was not going well, and I kept spiraling into darkness. I spent in my childhood not performing well, not fitting in. Yes. I moved into heavy drug use. At one point was addicted to heavy street drugs, living on the street, and just kind of a mess for most of my life, seeking help wherever I could, and going through drug treatment programs and various types of therapy, and various sorts of other healing modalities, antidepressants, drugs, scientific treatments, things like that, and finding that that sort of healing modality, it felt like it was sort of chewing me up and spitting me out. And then when I got to the other side of each of those things and didn't feel like much had changed, maybe I was a little bit more able to function so that I could go to work and look normal. Right. But nothing was reaching the core, and I felt, I felt that it must be me, that I must be damaged. And in fact, that was sort of reinforced by these modalities that I was working in, because, well, if that doesn't work, then it must be you, you know, maybe you're treatment resistant,
Yes.
right? Luckily, I think we all have in us this will to be, to live. And I think that for so many people now and in history, that's this unquenchable spark, you know, has been the saving grace. And I think for me, that was really true. And I just couldn't. And of course, there were many times that I was in darkness, and for many years, you know, and for a long time I was suicidal. I didn't see any hope, but I still felt that there must be. And I started reading the research that was coming out on plant medicines. And, you know, in my youth, I had experimented with psilocybin and stuff. And actually, what's really funny is that I thought that it was a downer, like a bummer. Like, come on, why are you trying to teach me stuff all the time? I just want to have fun and forget my troubles.
Oh, right.
I think I knew at some point, I think I knew all along that these were medicines. And so when I started to read that research, I thought, wow, wait, no, I've experienced this myself. I just wasn't ready for it. And maybe now I am. I eventually. Now,
would you say you were a spiritual person at the time when you were going through all this? This is an interesting, I think, part of your story.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I grew up in an atheist family, or with an atheist mother, and I didn't know my dad, but I knew that he was also an atheist. And yet, and yet, of course, that didn't seem to be the end of the story. I think, you know, I think that I wanted to be, I think that I was a spiritual person. And I think that I might even go as far to say that we are all spiritual people, but I was caught up in a world of cynicism, of jadedness, of a culture that tells you that if you believe in anything, if you have faith, you're kind of a loser. You know, you're kind of not very smart, and you probably haven't read enough science. And which I do. I'm very for science as well. Don't get me wrong, but I think there was always that inner battle, actually, of feeling like, yes, I know that there is more. I can sense it. Every fiber of my being knows it somehow, and yet I could never admit to it. It didn't seem to match up with the experience that I was living.
Yes.
To be honest.
Right.
As well. Like, yes, there is a part of me that understands that there must be more to this, but I can't for the life of me see what that is or how to get there. You know, it was very much like being trapped in this box, this paradigm that I was stuck in, along with the traumas.
Yes. Wow. And so you began just reading the research that was coming out with the plant medicine. And you said that that while you were reading this, you were experiencing a lot of these different things that they were starting to talk about, and all of these things. And you're like, wait, I've seen some of this. I've been experiencing. So take us on this journey. Take us on the journey, how you went into plant medicine and what's evolved from all of that. And what would you even say about plant medicine? Because, you know, before you do that, you know, there's going to be people that, you know, are against plant medicine. There's going to be people that are going to say, you know, this is just drug use and all you're doing is tripping out on drugs and that's what you're doing. And, you know, it's just like an LSD trip and that's all it is. And, you know, and there's a lot of fear around plant medicine. I know when I was coming to Ayahuasca Foundation to do it, there was a lot of fear that people were trying to put in my head about plant medicine and sending me all these articles and all these this and everything, you know, about the whole thing. And there is always, I think, going to be mixture in things. And there's going to be, you know, some people may have good experiences, some people may not. But for you, can you just before you dive in, just speak a little bit about those questions that people may have related to plant medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we come from a world that, because we're not embodied, because history, we've lost a lot of the perspective that would help us to see that this is medicine. So in these cultures, this is something that's been going on forever. It's certainly not seen as drug use. This is seen as an integral part of the way society is structured. There are certain people, let's call them shamans, that's not the word they use here, but the shamans say, who work with the medicine, they reach these spirit worlds, they attain wisdom, the ability to cure people, and this benefits society as a whole. You know, not everybody someone said this to me once, not everybody in the village needs to be the shaman. Yes. And so it's just part of the structure of society. It's not something that most people would even aspire to, even here. Many people, I would say, have tried ayahuasca once. Many people even here are like, oh, it was scary, I don't think I'm going to do it again, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think that we come from a world of quick fixes, of you know, big experiences that we have this one-time experience and then that's supposed to be it. Yes. And so of course, looking at these plant medicines in that context, it's going to seem like sensationalistic sort of drug use, you know, where you have this wild trip. And the thing is that nobody here and nobody who really works with plant medicine sees it that way, sees it as a quick fix.
Exactly. I love what you had to say about it being in the structure of the society that it is. And I think it's been that disconnect from the indigenous culture, disconnect from the earth, disconnect from what Mother Nature can teach us. There's that depth to it. And I remember just being at the Ayahuasca Foundation, nobody was seeing this as a drug trip. Like that's not what it was. It was sacred. It was extremely sacred.
Absolutely. And if you have ever tried ayahuasca, you will know that nobody would drink that just for fun.
No, it's not a fun moment. No. No. Yeah. So Carrie, okay, so you can carry, so let's continue this forward of just your journey then into plant medicine, seeing it as something sacred, seeing it as a connection to all there is.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I came to Peru, I went to a center called Kayashobo, just for, I think, 2 weeks. And it was a very short amount of time. And in that 2 weeks, I attended a number of ayahuasca ceremonies. And I did something called a plant dieta. And we can talk more about that. But briefly, you sort of enter into a communion with one particular plant. There's certain plants that are known as teacher plants. And they're not psychoactive in any way. You're basically making an extract of the bark or the leaves or, you know, the roots, something like that, consuming it, and then entering into a sort of relationship where you ask the spirit of the plant to teach you and to help you. And so I did one of these. I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea. I'd never heard of this before in my life. They were just like, here, have this. I was like, okay, let's do it. You know, I'm here for the whole package. Let's see. You know, I'm going to put myself into this 100% because if I don't, I'll never know if it works. And what I found is that it was impossible for me to not believe that there are beings with consciousness that are non-human and even non-animal. You know, the experiences that I had with these plant medicines felt to me like I was interacting with consciousnesses, with beings, with wisdom, and that we were interconnected, that they understood us, that we could come back to an understanding of them, and that we are part of this together, and that they want for us what is best. They life wants to live, you know, and they want this for us, and they want us to want it for them. And this is how things, you know, must have been before. If we listen to indigenous knowledge, you know, we can imagine that sort of a world. I was here just only for 2 weeks, and my plan wasn't to ever come back. I just thought, okay, I'll try this out and see what happens. And I immediately got like such a strong sense of, this is where I need to be. This is what I need to be doing. And it's hard to explain this. Like, I tend to default to the word calling. Like, I got a calling,
Right.
because that's the easy way to wrap it up.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that it triggered in me more of a remembering. It was like the first time that I felt something that felt like truth, something that felt like a truth that my body understood. It's like, wait, this is a piece that I think I've been looking for without even knowing that I was looking for it. And I think that what that piece is, and the way that I could describe that, is that sense of being interconnected, not being alone. It's so easy for us to feel alone. And I think that our culture kind of perpetuates that, you know, and not being always in competition. Another thing that our culture perpetuates, you know, being in symbiotic, helpful, healing relationship with a greater version of ourselves, you know, which is everything around us.
Yes.
And that's hard to say no to, you know, that's hard to say no to. I think that's what I was looking for.
Wow. Wow. And so on these journeys that you did, because you've been doing many now, you've done a variety of journeys. How was the trauma addressed? Let's look at this, because I know for me, areas of trauma were addressed after, you know, that first ayahuasca ceremony where you're like faced with death. I mean, I felt like I was faced literally with everything that I was fearing. I remember saying, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. And I remember Sonia, she's like, you are doing this. And I thought, oh my God, I am doing this. And it was scary because I was facing things that I had never faced before in my life. They were buried way down deep, and ayahuasca got to the root of that and pulled it right back up again. And I had to face that. And that was scary. And then the whole time I was there, and you know, that whole month we were facing things, all of us, including you and everybody who was involved. We were all facing these areas. And so can we talk about just trauma and specifically your experience with how plant medicine has helped to regulate your nervous system, how it has helped areas of healing and trauma, if you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, you know, back to the idea that there are no quick fixes. What I'm realizing, and we had talked before doing this today about some of the things we might talk about, and so I've been thinking about this. And you know, the last couple of weeks, I've had like a rough couple of weeks. Like, I've gone to some dark places, and so it's what was made clear to me by looking at that, and then by thinking about it in this context, is that life has not necessarily gotten easier. Certain things have, because I'm not replicating trauma patterns anymore. I can see them, I can get out of them. But life is still life, and things happen. What has changed is that I don't react the same way that I did. I go to my limits, but first of all, my limits are expanded. So it's like in trauma, there's this idea of like having a window of tolerance, and some people may have heard of this, you know, and if you go below your window of tolerance, you kind of shut down. If you go above your window of tolerance, you kind of go into fight or flight. And so what's happened is my window of tolerance has gotten bigger. But when I get to those points, when I get to those limits, it's not as devastating anymore. It's not as you know, massive for me. It's not, it doesn't send me into a dark spiral. I can be in the space, see what's going on. I have much more perspective. I have much more access to the tools that I've learned, and that we all have anyway. You know, we just need to be reminded of them, or have a little bit of a window where we can reach out and start to use them. Because sometimes this happens so fast. This is what would happen to me before, is that, you know, I'd be there before I knew it. There was no time to use any tools, and I would be like in a deep depression for a year, you know, and that was just like that. So I think in the big picture, what I would say is this has been a project of expanding my resilience. This has happened through the idea of really understanding in an embodied way that I am not alone, first of all, and that there is care and there is love. And, you know, people say things, and you see these memes all the time, you know, the universe is love, love is all you need, you know, stuff, but it's hard to understand. Like, it's like, yeah, that sounds nice, but what does it mean? And so now I can actually feel that, because I've experienced it by working with these consciousnesses, or, you know, certainly they seem to me to be consciousnesses. But also in an ayahuasca ceremony, for instance, and this is true with other plant medicines as well. When I was coming here for the first time, someone said, ayahuasca will show you who you really are. And that was terrifying.
Oh my God.
I don't want anyone else to see it, and I certainly don't want to see it.
Yeah.
But, you know, what we really are is never as bad as we think, and never, you know, it's not necessarily as great as we think either. It's like a realistic picture that then you can work with. And that's what I was shown, you know, who I am, which is a being who at my core is good, is light, is love, wants to feel love, wants to give love, you know, and that makes it a much more tolerable process to go into the darkness, you know, to feel held, to feel supported, to feel understood. Understood. That was a big thing for me. In ceremonies, you know, I've had some processes that have been really hard, really hard, and they haven't really even made sense until much after, because of course this is not a one-off thing. You need to take time to integrate. You know, you need to take time to process what's happened, talk to people about it. It's really good to do this sort of thing in community. But I've also had ceremonies where I've finally gotten up the courage and like, okay, I'm going to finally look at this one thing that I've been so scared to look at, even to admit to myself. And I work up the courage and I go in and I'm shaking and I'm like, okay, ayahuasca, this is what I want to work on today. Please help me. And she's like, okay, bam, 15 minutes, we're done. It's like, what? You know, so, so I guess what I'll say with that is that we never get more than we can handle. I really feel like we're working with intelligences who understand us deeply and who know the best way to work with what we're going through. And sometimes, yeah, you know, I wish it wasn't true, but I am the kind of person who needs to learn things the hard way a lot of the time. But sometimes I've already done things in such a hard way that the medicines then will provide me with grace. And they're always sort of like, you know, it's I found that the things that I thought were going to be really scary weren't that scary. And then some things that, I was maybe a little more in denial about. Those were a little harder, but of course they need to be, because you need to dig that up and really see it in order to heal from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me with ayahuasca, there was a greater release in areas of emotion for me. And I can't say that I totally noticed it right then. I would say it was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 months later. And I was starting to realize, just like you said, there were areas where I hadn't shown emotion, and now I was showing emotion. And then there were areas where it would have been obnoxious emotion. I was no longer having those emotions. It was that resilience you were talking. It was that threshold, that ability to step back and actually reason with the situation. And I think that's what I learned with ayahuasca, was that going into these dark places, I could step back. I had to face some of that. I mean, that first ceremony, oh God, so I had to face some things, but as over time, I was able to step back and reflect in the situation. And I was actually working with my body. If there's anything, I'd love to talk to you about just, what it means, like working with your body, because I got in tune and in touch with my body in a way that I had never been in tune and in touch with my body at all. I was feeling those traumatic things. I was, there were different, the body was shaking and all these sorts of different, I was in touch with myself in a way I had never been before. And from ayahuasca, I've continued to have these releases, these physical releases, and I just keep remembering. I mean, it's so interesting when I have these releases, because I've been having some since April all the way till now, just these different type of releases that have been happening. And it's just like, my God, I mean, they're intense, but then at the same time, I'm able to really regulate myself in it. I'm able to breathe. I'm able just to calm down and just be at peace. And I know that I learned that while I was at, the ayahuasca ceremonies. I learned how to regulate parts of my system as it's starting to go. I was learning how to connect with it in a way. And it brought, and another thing, and we'll talk, because I do want to hear you. It really isn't about me. But I was very, it created a self-love in me because I was connecting with my body. I was connecting with that trauma, or I was connecting with just stuff that was really awesome and amazing about myself. And so all of that standing and observing myself, all of that regulating myself, and all the stuff I've been doing this entire year has caused a deeper self-love, has brought me into that place of loving me. But I was so disconnected from my body. And I think for me, that was a big thing with ayahuasca, was connecting with the body. So can you talk a little bit about that, connecting with the body?
Absolutely. And this is such a fascinating area for me. There's a growing body of literature and of scientific work that is showing that trauma is in the body. And so these treatments like talk therapy, for instance, actually don't work that well for trauma. Of course, they're useful. Of course, it's important to be heard. And sometimes we need to get our stories straight, but they don't get to the root of it, because the root of it is in our bodies.
Yes.
We live in a culture that has taught us that this is separate, and that this rules, and that this is to be subjugated, to be dominated, to be controlled, and to, we like get rid of the messy parts, and we don't show things, and we, contain ourselves. I also work in a modality called TRE, which stands for trauma release exercises. I think we probably did some of this while you were in the
Yeah, boy, I remember that session. Well, there are a few sessions, yes.
Yeah, and so like one of the ways that they discovered that this sort of thing works is it was developed in war zones by someone named Dr. David Berselli. And he noticed that they were in a bomb shelter, bombs were going off, and he noticed that he would start to tremor, and then he would stop it. The kids would tremor, And he talked to the other adults afterwards, and he said, were you tremoring? And they said, yeah, of course, but I stopped myself from doing it because I didn't want to look weak. I didn't want to make the kids scared. You know, we have this idea that we need to stop these processes from occurring. It turns out that that's sort of faking, and that faking is something that people experience a lot in an ayahuasca ceremony. Is a release, is our body's natural way of regulating our nervous system.
Yes.
And so I think when we're with the medicine, a couple of things happen. One is that we don't have so much control. There's so much going on. We're like perhaps seeing things, or perhaps thinking things, or, you know, feeling things. And it can be quite, you know, overwhelming even, but just a lot. And so these things happen, and we don't shut them down. You know, we actually let them happen. So we start to tremor. We're not really thinking about controlling it. It just happens, and our body can finally release. What also happens with plant medicines is, you know, there's all sorts of stuff happening in the brain. There's you know, I'm not going to go deep on this. There are experts who can talk more about this, but we've got something called our default mode network, and this kind of shuts off in these experiences. So we're not thinking about ourselves. We're not ruminating. We're not self-reflecting in the same sort of way. So we can experience these things without having self-judgments about them. And I think that those things combined, there are many pieces that combine together to allow us to experience release, experience that it is safe, experience that it is something, you know, important, and that we might want to continue, and also witness ourselves doing it. Witness, hey, wait, this is happening, and it feels, I can feel stuff. Maybe I can feel energies being released, or maybe I can feel emotions starting to come up. Maybe I can feel tension melting away from my body. Maybe I, you know, there are all sorts of ways that a person can experience that, but we're able to see it for what it is without our usual cognitive chatter coming online and stopping the process. And I think that having that experience once, and especially having that experience once in a safe place where you're held and you get to talk about it, and people can reflect back at you and say, well, I think that this is what happened, you know, and it was a good thing, and let's go with it. That can really put us in a place where our bodies become safe. Our bodies want to heal.
Yes, yes, they do.
Want to heal. In fact, we're so good at it. It's just that we get in our own ways, you know, and these medicines get us out of our own ways for a little bit of time. And then we have the choice to get back in our own way, or, you know, and we will, of course, we always will, but we can start to, you know, be a little bit more dynamic in that, and not so stuck in the patterns we've always fallen into, and start to open up the natural healing potential that we are and that we have.
Yes. Yeah. For me, it was awareness. For me, it was, it opened me up to the awareness of my body, just being aware of my body. It's not just like touching your hand, you know, and you're just like, oh yeah, I got this hand. No, it was like, I could touch the hand to go in the hand. I could experience the whole entire hand. And it was a beautiful, beautiful experience, because it was this whole awareness piece for me about the need that my body had to release. Our bodies talk to us. They tell us things. And that's what was happening when I was there. It was talking to me. It was telling me, hey, I need to be released in areas, you know, and it was about me. I had to allow for that. I did. I agreed. I gave permission. But my body was just brilliant technologies in my body, honestly, to heal about. We're brilliant, like the way we've been created, the way of the light and the universe within us, this creative us, what we have, we can heal ourselves. We can.
Absolutely. Oh my God, Ellen, this is like the heart of what makes me so passionate about this, you know. And yeah, I mean, I work in somatics as well. That was around the same time as I was coming into plant medicine. I started working both for myself, like to heal my own traumas with somatic modalities. So TRE, sensory motor psychotherapy, there are a number of them, sensory experiencing. And this idea that, you know, our bodies hold the key, our bodies are where things are stored. If we're not in touch with our bodies, we're not going to heal, we're not going to become whole, because we're not divided here. We are a functional unit. And in fact, you know, what's interesting is that of the information, so we've got, you know, in our nervous system, there's these nerves, afferent, efferent, some go to our brain, some go to our body. Most of the information that comes in
Sorry. I know, continue.
all right. Yeah, so I don't know where I cut out. I do apologize. Iquitos is known for having notoriously unstable internet. I'm thrilled that we've been able to get this far already. But I was saying that, you know, like, information comes into the body. In fact, 80% of the information that's coming into us comes in through our bodies. Then it gets filtered up through our limbic systems, which is the seat of emotion. So we filter it. We're like, oh, this makes me feel this way. This makes me think of a past experience. We filter it. And then it goes into our cognitive mind. And then we make stories about it so that we can understand it. But these stories are third-hand information. And of course, if we've got traumas, if we've had past experiences that weren't positive, or that didn't show us that there are, you know, positives and stuff, then we're going to interpret things that come in negatively, because that's how it is in the end result. But if we can tap into our bodies and just experience the 80% of information that's coming in, we get a whole new sense of the world. The world stops being an unsafe, inherently unsafe place for those of us who have experienced it that way in the past. You know, I certainly had. The world felt inherently unsafe.
Yeah, me too.
I can stop experiencing it that way because I'm tuned into my body. My body is giving me the cues. It's not filtering through my old emotions. It's not filtering through my old thought patterns. You know, it's coming, I'm listening, and it is speaking to me about the present, about what's happening now. And now, you know, right now it's it's a beautiful sunny day. There's hawks in the tree. It's phenomenal. You know, I'm speaking with you. It's wonderful. Like there's nothing actually unsafe about what's happening right now. And so that gives me one experience of a positive, you know, a positive experience. And it rewires my neural pathways. Like, oh, wait, it's not all bad. There's now this one experience of, hey, this is something different. Like, this is something I can be curious about. This is something that I can, you know, feel safe about and start to enjoy and be like, oh yeah, it is a really nice day. And I do really like talking to you, and, you know, and then it teaches us to do that, like you were talking about, you know, like the once we unlock this stuff in our body, it starts to happen again, because our bodies are like, thank God, thank God you're finally listening to me and letting me do my work. I would love to heal you. So let me, you know, and so it starts to come up, and then it just spirals. And it's a process that takes time, and it requires awareness, and it requires willingness, and it requires consent. You know, you have to say, yes, I want this. I choose this, and it's probably going to feel scary at first, and I'm going to be open. And it takes time, but it's fundamental, and it's lasting, and it gets to the root of things. And that's not something that I've experienced before in any other of the many modalities that I sought help in.
Yeah. And I would say I'm in the same boat as you. I went through lots of therapies, lots of different things for healing. and it did something and continues to do something and continues to move through my system in a way that is absolutely beautiful. And the thing is, I love talking to you, Clove. I feel like I could go a bazillion directions, and I just sit here and I just listen. I'm like, oh, I love you. The thing that I take away from just my ayahuasca experience is, though there were moments when it didn't feel gentle, and ayahuasca wasn't always gentle, there was a best interests at heart that was on the flip side of this. And yeah, I just, I don't, oh gosh, I could go on and on, but we'll keep moving. I'm staying focused. But that is what I have, I take away from there, is that though there were challenging moments and I had to step in things and those vapor baths and all those things, and my goodness, I overcame that thing. I had so much fun in those vapor baths. But each time I had to step into those things and everything like that, I had to just talk to myself. But it was like you could feel the presence there. You could feel presence of love. Ayahuasca wasn't there to like whip you silly and like treat you terribly, and all these other plant medicines we were doing, but not at all. It was you've given me permission. I'm now going to go here. And I could have at any point said no. I could have at any point, but I chose not to. I didn't want to. I wanted to push. Part of it was pushing myself. I think sometimes, we're stronger than we think. As humans, our spirits, our bodies, our souls, we are stronger than we think. And when we think that we can't take any more of it, we get that second wind, and we can. I mean, I remember saying, I am not going to go do another ceremony. And I was like, no, I'm going to do another ceremony. And but it was because what happened was, on the flip side of it, the love, the levels of peace, the sense of safety, the sense of belonging to everything. That, because I always felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Oh my God. You feel like you belong. You feel like, oh my God. And it's just becoming aware to that. It's just like a veil being lifted right off your eyes. And you're like, oh my God, we all belong. I belong. You belong. In fact, we're connected. In fact, we're in very much a unified oneness, like it's a beautiful thing. So, oh my gosh, I can go on and on. So, all right, I'm gonna move a little bit forward here. So, you mentioned a while back, actually, these different modalities that you've done. Now, if somebody does not have opportunity, let's say they can't come down to Peru, or they don't know where to go, but they want to have some of these traumatic releases, these trauma releases. What would you suggest for them? What are some things that people can either do just by themselves, things that they've been practicing, or what would you say if they can't get to plant medicine to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I didn't finish. There was a thought that I didn't finish, which is that I was doing these somatic modalities, and then I came to plant medicine, and I found, wow, these are both teaching me the same thing, which is to get into my body. So there's an option there if you can't get to plant medicines. And of course, unfortunately, it's still illegal in most places. Many of these things. That's changing. Yeah, I think it's changing quite rapidly. But we can get to some of the same things that these plants are trying to teach us or remind us of. And this is all, for me, and I think I said this before, this is like a great remembering.
Yes. Oh, come on.
Although everything is so profound, and I can journal for hours after a ceremony, and it's like, wow, it all feels very familiar. Like, wait, I know this. And that element to it is, it's that's what convinces me time and time again. It's like, oh wait, I already know this. Something deep in me, and I've forgotten it, and I've been taught to forget it, and I've been encouraged to forget it, by many forces in society, because when we remember it, we're in our power. That's for one thing. Right. Yep. But the things that it teaches us, and so we've spoken about this now, kind of at length. It's about being embodied, and that's a big part of it. And that is something that we can easily do. There are so many modalities that are really accessible. I would highly recommend TRE. There are plenty of others.
Explain what that is.
Absolutely. So I'll just say there are plenty of others that do tend to require you working one-on-one with someone. TRE is a little bit different because, like I said, it was kind of born in war zones to deal with that sort of immediate trauma. There's no therapy. You can't go to a, you can't go to a yoga class in a war zone. You can't, there's like a lot of things that you just can't access that would probably be beneficial, but you can't do them. TRE is accessible. You can do it on your own once you've learned how to do it. I'd recommend especially if you're dealing with serious trauma, to do it with a trained professional once or twice, get a feel for it. And then you can do it on your own forever. You can do it anywhere. So what this is, it's trauma release exercises. And like we were talking about before, we're shaking. Now I know there are things like shaking yoga or something where you're like actually shaking yourself. This is not it. So it's a neurogenic tremor. So it's something that originates in our brain and our spinal cord. It's a tremoring mechanism. When you do it, so you can probably attest to this, it's like you're not doing it. It's like, what the hell is my body doing right now? Like something's happening and I'm not the one making it happen. It's like my conscious, I'm not willing it to happen. It's something that my body is doing, and it can be a little bit disconcerting at first to experience that. But again, going back to that idea that our bodies know how to heal themselves if we just get out of our way. So this is it's a series of exercises that allow this neurogenic tremor to come through. And then you move into various shaking patterns, and it can be super subtle. It can be very big. It expresses in a whole lot of ways for different people at different times. But it is a profound reset. So they've used this, they used this after 9/11 for first responders. They've used this in war zones. They have done it with Israelis and Palestinians in the same room doing a shake together.
Wow.
A way of, it was profound, like, of course, when they got into that room, they were like, you're the enemy, you're the enemy. And afterwards, after going through that experience together, they were like, oh, I get it. I'm scared and you're scared. Really, really powerful, really extraordinary modality, and so accessible. Like you can get, it's Dr. David Berceli. He's written a book about this, and he's got a DVD that you can get. There's also, you can just Google TRE and find a practitioner, do a session or two with them, and then continue on your own. But you can do this for 15 minutes or an hour or whatever you'd like, whatever you can fit in. And it simply resets the nervous system. It releases patterns of tension and trauma that are stored in the body. When we get into traumatic situations, high stress, high tension, we have all these neurotransmitters, these hormones, adrenaline, cortisone, that are kind of like in the body, and they can get stuck there because we don't fully go through it. We shut ourselves down. We're like, must work, must, get myself together, must, whatever. And we don't allow the process to be completed. And so we've got these stuck traumas, stuck stresses, stuck tensions in our bodies. And this allows us to complete them, to release them, to reset. What's really cool about this nervous system work is, and also with plant medicine, because I really feel like they at least in this way overlap in a very big way, is that when our nervous systems are dysregulated, we are not able to connect with people.
Oh my gosh.
So this is because, when we're in our sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, or in a shutdown state, we're not in this one state it's called the ventral vagus nerve. Don't want to get too technical here.
I'm following here. Okay.
We need to get into this state because this is the state that resets us. This is the state where we rest. digest, restore, our bodies repair themselves. So we need to get into the state at least every once in a while so that we can do all these things. But it's also the state in which we're able to connect with people. I always thought maybe there's something wrong with me because I just can't seem to connect with people.
Yes.
I must be flawed. I must be sort of damaged. I'm going to be alone my whole life. You know, just all these things. Really, what was going on is that my nervous system was never regulated. I was constantly in a state of dysregulation. When I started to do this work, both with the somatic stuff and with plant medicines, and really started to, you know, clear out all of that stuck stuff. And of course, there's still stuff. This is an ongoing process. I am by far not healed, you know, healing. But when I started to do this, I found that as a side effect, I was connecting more with people because I was more in this nervous system state that allowed for that. And I realized, wow, you know, it wasn't like we can so easily think this is just me. I'm just an angry person, or I'm just a depressed person, or I'm just a, you know, all these things. I'm just like spacey, you know. I'm never really here. It's like that's just me, you know, like all these things that are actually our nervous system being dysregulated. And when we start to address that stuff, everything changes. Every system in our body changes. Our whole way of thinking changes because, you know, the hormones and stuff, not because, but like the hormones and stuff that are in our bodies are different. And they're not sending the same messages. We're not responding in the same way. We're not stuck in old trauma patterns and old behaviors. Like everything changes, and that allows for endless possibility. And, you know, when that starts to open up, it becomes evident that, yeah, you know, the world is hard and there's a lot that's not great, but it really is beautiful, and there is love and there is connection. Knowing that and feeling that and experiencing it can change everything. And that snowballs. That starts the snowball, not the other stuff. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend for people exploring some of these ways to not just get into their body. Of course, any way that you can get into your body is good. Just going for a walk or doing some stretching or whatever it may be. But some of these that are more targeted trauma or stress or tension interventions, such as TRE, and then if you have access to it, there's a whole range of others. That would be a great way to start. Also for plant medicines, you know, not all of them are psychoactive in the same way as we think. You know, we were talking earlier and you mentioned cacao. Cacao is a beautiful medicine. It is a heart opener. It allows us to connect with love, to connect with emotion in a safe way, in a protected way. This is something that you can access very easily. One thing that I really like about the things that we do here in the jungle or indigenous communities around the world is that there's a ceremony.
Yes.
Ceremony. There's the ceremonial aspect to things. And so it's not just taking a pill. You know, it's not just a one-off thing. You're engaged in something. You're making space for it. You're acknowledging its sacred nature, you know, making it sacred by acknowledging it. And so you can do this at home, you know, get some proper cacao. It's really easy to get anywhere in the world. And have a little ceremony and really put your intention into it. What is your intention? Why might you want to open your heart? You know, really start to think about these things. Set aside some time, set aside some space, notice how you feel, you know. So ceremony, I think, is another important aspect. And I think that although we are moving into a place where plant medicines do look like they're going to become more accessible in Western countries, you know, at least under therapeutic circumstances, a lot of those are lacking that element. It's more like a laboratory. You go in, put a blindfold on, and you put some headphones on, and you have this experience. And we're missing that whole element of communion, of unity, of, you know, there's something missing there. Not that it's not good. I highly recommend. I'm all for this. I think it's fantastic what's happening. You know, with the with the research and changing laws and stuff. But there's something really important about ceremony too, to again remind us of all these things that we've been talking about, this connection, this like the meaning behind things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit I know you're mentioning the importance of ceremony, but some people might not understand what you're actually meaning by ceremony. So what you can share, can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah. I mean, here we do ceremony in a very particular way. And if you go to different tribes in the Amazon basin, they all do their ceremonies in very different ways. So there's no right or wrong way to do a ceremony. But a ceremony is a time set aside, made sacred, that you prepare for, that you leave out, you leave behind everything else. You don't bring your day into it. You're not in ceremony thinking about what you're going to eat tomorrow, or the groceries you have to buy, or any of that, your mortgage. You really set aside a time. You make it important. You allow it to for that time be everything. So you here it's done in the dark. Other places there's a fire. Other places there's music. Here there's singing. It's the vibrations of the voice in the Shipibo tribe and tradition. When I do different types of ceremony, for instance, the cacao ceremony, I don't necessarily bring in all those elements, but I will maybe like find some music that seems appropriate. Maybe I'll take some time to ground myself. You can make anything ceremony.
Yes.
It doesn't need to be elaborate. It doesn't need to be like like it doesn't need to have like eagle feathers and like like thing. It doesn't need to be anything specific. Yeah, it's just about taking the time, taking the space, realizing that what you are involved in is sacred. And I think, what I mean by sacred is that it is something that we are intentionally doing to move in the direction of life. We are honoring life by doing this. We are honoring our own life. We're taking time as well to honor the life of, maybe it's the cacao, maybe it's the ayahuasca, honor where it came from, honor its intelligence, honor, whatever, like all the factors that are involved. So it's just taking that time to reflect on and really show with our actions that we acknowledge this. And when we allow ourselves to acknowledge it in this way that is so evident, because we've made it, so we've carved out a space, we've carved out a time, we've gone out of our way to have elements in there that make it feel to us like ceremony, like ritual, like something sacred. It allows us to connect to that part of ourselves and then to receive from that place, which makes it different from just drinking a cacao on a patio with some friends. It's a different thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if that was super clear.
No, that's perfect. No. I love how you just made it very simplistic for people, that it can be whatever it is, but it's coming from that place of the heart. I found when we did the ceremonies, when ayahuasca or all the ones we did, were all wrapped in a ceremonial atmosphere. Not only was there more of an honoring towards what was actually happening within the plant medicine itself, but there was also an honoring that was coming from the consciousness of the plants as well. And there was this mutual honoring that was happening, and it was like a dance. And I mean, the best way I can describe it is almost like it's like a romance. It's a wooing and a giving and a receiving, and a wooing and a giving and a receiving, and it's just beautiful. It's beautiful when it's wrapped in that. It's just it's beautiful. And I found it helps with focus. It helps you identify, well, why am I doing this? I mean, it reveals the ego, and that, you know, if you're just wanting to do this for the hell of it, it's just a kick of it. I mean, I know that can lead to new things and lead to different things, but it does reveal. I found ceremony reveals my motivations. It would reveal that. What are you really wanting? What is it that you're here for? And it was beautiful. It was so sacred, it was so holy. I remember after some of those ceremonies and just leaving, and you know, I would always go up to my room, and I would just lay in the bed there, and I would be in the dark, and you know, I'd be just sitting there, and it followed me. That sacred atmosphere, that holy atmosphere, it created a sacred pause. It was like a holy hush would just come over me in a way that I was just so thankful. I was so grateful. To the consciousness of the plant. I was so grateful for what was actually happening in my heart. I was so grateful that I was remembering, that I was connecting, that I was doing all those things that you've been talking about, because it was like, you're right. I know who I am. I remember this. This is familiar. This is, you know, and it was beautiful. It was just, wow. Yeah, something incredible. Did you hear me?
Okay, I lost you for a bit.
Lost me for a minute. Well, that's okay. I was just saying how it was just just a sacred pause, a sacred reflection would come over me after ceremony, and I just would cry, because I was just grateful for remembering myself and being brought back to myself, and that's what I love about the plant medicines, the connection piece.
Really, it's like about meaning, you know, and how we make meaning, and remembering that it's up to us to make meaning, and taking the time to make things meaningful. Like you were saying, it's a wooing. Like, you wouldn't, you know, like if you're on a date, you know, you want to impress this person that you're gonna, you know, set up the place, you're gonna light some candles, you're gonna dress in a certain way, you know, there's just elements in it that make it meaningful, and that show you and the other being, you know, that it's a meaningful occasion, and then allow you to remember the fact that there is meaning, because that for me is like, that was really that was the core of what brought me here, is that I couldn't find the meaning. I was like, where is the meaning? What is the meaning? I don't know. I can't tap into it. And so when we take this time to create something that's meaningful,
Yes.
it, like you're saying a little bit, it like, for me, it makes it much easier for me to find that space even in my daily life. You know, I can just take a minute that's kind of like a mini ceremony, like a micro ceremony, you know, because I know how to get into that place, and it just allows me to just tap into meaning. And I think by doing this larger act of ceremony, where we make it an event, it's again like a remembering. It's like it's teaching us of you know, what we care about, and yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Clove, I feel like I could talk to you forever. I do have just a couple more questions, and then, you know,
Yeah.
we'll be wrapping this up. But so where do you see plant medicine going? I know you've mentioned that things are starting to open up in the West, and where do you see this going, and how do you want it to go? Because I think, like, we can go, oh my gosh, like, it's opening up in the West and it's great, but how would you like to see it? So first, where do you see it going? And then how would you like plant medicine to progress in the
Yeah. You know, I'll say that actually I've been in the jungle for the last 2 years, and most of the time I'm completely offline. And so I'm not as, like, I haven't been following the developments that have been happening in that world, in the world of like legislation, regulation. I know that MDMA trials, psilocybin trials, have been progressing to a point where it's pretty likely that these things will be legally available treatment options really soon. You know, probably quite broadly around the world as things start to unfold. But yeah, I mean, I actually don't know where the situation is right now. What I can say is that, of course, like with everything, there are opportunistic people who are looking to make money off this, and there are people who are trying to patent these things, and there are, you know, all of this, right? And that is certainly worrisome. Of course, like my desire would be for this is nature. You know, this is nature, this is freely available around us. And that it should be freely available to the people who require it, even people without the means to access it, you know, especially if those means are monetary. You know, that is something that's really close to my heart. That is just seeing that, you know, you can do these things, but you need to be able to pay to do your 5 sessions with your trained therapist. And I mean, I was at there was a time, you know, when like I said, I was living on the street for some of my life. I couldn't afford, I could only afford the treatment options that were free. And those ones had waiting lists of years. And
Yes.
I thought, I'm not going to survive years. I'm not going to make it years, you know? I need something now. I need something that's going to work now, because otherwise I'm going to be dead, you know? And so like it's worrisome to me that could happen. And I do know that there are plenty of people around the world who are working to, you know, advocate for the other side of things, for accessibility. Again, we were talking about like this laboratory situation with blindfolds and headphones, and that can be lovely. But I think there's an element of community that's missing from that. And there's like this mutual support. And you know, that can be true here as well. People in the last, say, 20 years, you know, there was an ayahuasca boom here where more and more people started to come down here, to the point where for a little while, ayahuasca started to be endangered. Indigenous people could no longer afford it. Thankfully, we've moved past that. There are now lots of ayahuasca plantations. We're not in that situation anymore, but there was a blip in time where, you know, that was happening. And centers were popping up all over the place by people who just wanted to make money. Right. And they were not great places. They were places that you would go, and like I was describing about the other modalities that I worked in, where you'd kind of be like, shoot up and spit out. Like, here you go, thanks for your money, drink your thing, see ya. And so one thing that I think is really important, and that I am personally working to foster and to educate about, is the fact that there needs to be a much more holistic approach to this. We need to have supports. We need to have a focus on preparation, a focus on integration. We need to have follow-ups. We need to have people who are there to hold you through the experience, to potentially guide you through the experience, or at least give you tips so that you can start to guide yourself. That is a really important element for these things, no matter where you are and no matter what sort of medicine it is. I do see that changing here. More and more people are becoming trauma informed. There's a lot of integration coaches now. That's kind of like a growing field. So this is becoming more accessible. But anywhere that there's things that are new, there are going to be people who are just trying to profit off it. And that's always a danger. So, and I mean, that's true for anything in this world, you know, yes. So it's going to be true here too. So yeah, I mean, those are sort of my like immediate practical concerns. I mean, if you ask me what my real hopes are, it would be something like, you know, this would grow to a sort of tipping point that would perhaps subvert the system, you know? Yeah. Like, there are people who say that this is why the wars took off in the way that they did when people were experimenting in the 60s, you know, because it's a challenge to power, you know, when we find our own power and we find unity. and when we're not so easily divided, and all these things, right? Like, so, you know, I would like to think that there's a possibility here for some broader social change when more people tap into this remembrance of who we are, and, you know, what we're actually doing, what is actually meaningful, and that there is, and that the world around us is full of consciousness, you know.
Yes.
It's not just inanimate stuff that's to be profited off and cut down and made into resources, and, you know, and that we are all interconnected, and that what we do matters, you know, like all of these things. I think that if more people who really, truly, fundamentally feel this in an embodied way, the more likely it is that things won't continue in the same way that they've been going in the world, in the greater scheme of things, you know, and that we will be able to make some shift. That's my hope.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Clove. I could just say, I know where you're sitting. I could just sit there. We'll just, I feel like I could just talk to you forever. I just, your wisdom, your honoring of the Shipibo people, the indigenous, really speaks volumes to me personally. And I know probably to a variety of people that are listening in. And just your love for Mother Earth, your love for healing, your love for process. You're a process girl, and I love that about you. That's probably, it's one of the things I love is that, you know, yes, there can be these wild experiences that you can have, but there's also elements of a process of healing. And, you know, just shooting for the quick fix doesn't work. And I love that you said these things. And I love how you've incorporated it into a sacred dance for all of us, how you've opened up this whole entire platform here. I feel like it's just you and myself, and we're just sitting having a little chat together, but you have created a really sacred space, and you've created a space of real honor and unconditional love. And I feel the plants, I feel them here. And I just want to say that I really just honor you. I honor where you're headed. I am behind your advocacy on this 100%. If I come back down there, I get a chance, we'll sit and we'll talk about some ways of advocacy. But I just really, I just am blessed with the way in which you have taken sensationalism out of it, and you've brought it back to the heart of the matter, to the core of the matter, which is there is a light and there is a love in the universe, and that we're all light and we're all love and we're all one and we're all joined together, and nature is holding us, universe is holding us. And the way that you brought that across, hits right here. And I hope that the audience as well, who's listening in, feels that and knows that, and can sense that as well. So I just want to say thank you for just your authenticity and your rawness and your ability to just kind of do this live, since you've never done one before. So here we are. And I just really appreciate just you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you for those words. I will say that, first of all, it would be fantastic to see you back here. But really what I want to say is that, I've never done anything like this before. And I don't think that I could have done it with anyone but you. You have a way of making me really feel safe, feel heard. And you're full of a spark of curiosity, of interest, you know, and that is a contagious thing. It's easy to not be self-conscious around you, and just to be having a chat. I really honor you for that, for the person you are, for the medicine that you embody with your being, and that I've seen in you from day one of meeting you. It's so beautiful to see what you're doing here. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm so glad we had a chance to talk and catch up and reflect.
Absolutely. All right, Clove, I'm going to have to close this out. So love you immensely.
I love you too.
And we definitely will touch base again.
All right. Thank you.